Hello, everybody. We are back on the Chesterfield sofas. They feel so shiny this week, and don't they? I'm really happy.
Shiny.
Tacky. They feel sticky.
No, tacky.
They feel like they've come from a revolution.
They're not tacky. Do you know what? It's nice though to be sat on the sofas again, having a chat. I'm sick of all those ones we did on Zoom.
Sick of them.
Sick of them.
Rubbish.
Honestly,
Yeah, Zoom
Zoom's rubbish.
Yeah, it's
Isn't
not
it?
good, is it?
Delays. Look, we did our best. And there'll be plenty more to come on Zoom because we'll probably be in another lockdown. Don't want to break it to you.
Did we do our best? I'm not sure we did.
Well,
I think some things we did.
Flash gave his best.
Yeah.
Yeah,
All
it's
4
He
words each
muted
episode.
himself for a whole episode once
I
because
didn't notice.
his child was walking in.
Yeah, my child kept sitting on my knee, screaming. I thought I'll just mute myself.
I think you were muted.
And no one will know.
I think you were
I'll
muted
just
for-
just
for,
nod
I think
along.
The Stuart Pearce episode, you were muted because your son ate your headphones or something, didn't he?
Yeah, them, yeah.
Ate your
Yeah,
AirPods.
everything.
Taking
But
it
look-
we're taking it seriously, guys.
Well, take it seriously. No, there are topics to take seriously, and I think the people who have stuck with us all these years, all 3.5 of them,
Captain Jibbers is one.
Captain Jibbers, he's not to be seen. for the
Anybody
last
else?
few. I'm worried about
Anybody
Jibbers.
else? Any other OGs?
Yeah, there's a few.
You
Ian,
do know I was Captain Jibbers.
Well, yeah.
You didn't know that.
Were you actually?
Did you not tell
You've
me?
not got time for that, John.
John, you don't know what social media is until you
exactly.
Yeah, when everyone trolled you, you ran away. But look, we have tackled or tried to tackle some semi-serious / serious topics. Don't know how well we've done it, but we've had people on telling their stories, which is what it's about. I think it's evolved. It's evolved into people telling this, which is about. It's not about us. It's about people telling. However, this one is about us. It was about you two clowns, and I've got a little topic for you. Something that's been sort of ringing around my mind and resonating a little bit was recently Naomi Osaka. Okay, for those who don't know, I'm sure you do. Brilliant tennis player, former world number 1. She's only 23 years old. But she burst onto the scene in 2018 and she beat Serena Williams. And basically, the story of her beating Serena Williams was Serena Williams having an argument with an umpire. And it went on and on and on and on. And this young girl at the time, it's not patronising to say girl because she was a teenager. And she wasn't the story, and it wasn't on the back pages. It wasn't like, wow, this girl / woman, amazing tennis player, is going to take over the world. It was about Serena Williams having an argument with an umpire.
But that's
And that's a whole other discussion. But recently, she's been talking about mental health, and she's been talking about depression, and said she's had these, severe bouts of depression since she burst onto the scene because she wasn't equipped to handle being at that level as an athlete, right? But the one thing that really clicked with me is the relationship with the press, athletes, players, whatever you want to call them. And I know it's different when you're an individual, whether you're a golfer, whether you're a tennis player, compared to what you guys have been through as a team sport. And, you may be the superstar being scrutinised, but most of the time it's a team and it's shared, isn't it? It's a shared burden. But how would you then, as rugby league players, you've only recently retired, describe your relationship with the media and with the press?
Well, I think specifically if we're talking about what was their concern post-match press conferences in particular, or not wanting to attend a post-match press conference.
I think it's both. Sorry, but you get started. But it's the sort of the routine of having to do them, and also this is a woman who is willing to pull out of a Grand Slam tournament, the French Open, because she couldn't deal with the rigors of facing the press. And obviously the mental health issue, which is a much bigger topic, and we've been over and whatever. But I'm saying that was the final spike, that was the final trigger that she did not want to face the press. Should it be that much of a burden that it stops a great talent pulling out of a major tournament?
Yeah, well, I think that press conferences for me throughout my career have been one of the most pointless events in your diary. Like, after a game, sitting in a press conference as a captain or through the week, press conferences, interactions with the media, for me have been relatively pointless. As in...
Why?
Because the story is being written already by the question that you've been asked. I remember Paul Wellens, we were sat in a press conference at a table, and one of the journalists asked if Danny Maguire, could be the Great Britain standoff. Bear in mind, Leon Price was in our team who, was the Great Britain standoff at the time. And then he said, yeah, of course he could be, but obviously Leon... And then the headline was, Paul Wellens says Maguire should be standoff for Great Britain or whatever. And that, just blatant editorial mistrust between the actual, you know, the tagline on the story and like the content of the story is like a problem in sport.
But it's not new, that laziness, which is what it is, because let's call it as it is. It's not new, is it?
No, it's sensationalism. So the press control the narrative, and then they will sensationalize a story in order to get more clicks, more readership, and then money on the back of it from their bosses. Now, I've probably not, well, I know I've not experienced as much press coverage or conferences as, say, John or certainly Naomi Osaka. But one thing I've noticed over the years is athletes and players are instructed to go to press conferences, do interviews, and then whoever's interviewing them, they're in charge, or they dictate the narrative of where that goes. Similar to Paul Wellens with that press conference. Now, the athletes are the products. They create the game, whether it's tennis or rugby league, and the fans are a big part of that. But the media promote it, but nothing else. But they completely dictate what is said in the press and how stories are spun. Now, I'm quite pleased that Osaka has taken this stance, because for too long I think the press have taken control of what happens in these press conferences, and players or athletes just do their bit and attend these conferences, and sometimes they're hung out to dry. Whereas they really hold the power, because the media don't have a job or they don't have revenue without the players.
Yeah, but hold on. Let me interject just there, right? And obviously this depends in different sports, and you guys will know this. But for example, take Premier League football, right? Where the press conferences are far too much. And I've spoken to Pep Guardiola about this. Name drop, pick up the microphone. Genuinely though, he has come over here via Bayern Munich from Barcelona in a completely different sport to tennis, and said, this is ridiculous, the amount of interviews we do, the amount of pre-match, post-match, sometimes different sports, NFL, during match interviews, half-time interviews, you know. He said it's too much, that he should do one interview that's not a press conference, that's on the day of the game,
fair enough.
and that should be given to all the broadcast rights
that's
holders.
how it should be.
However, let me give you the other side. Broadcast rights holders, and I know it's different in rugby league, but still, comparatively, rationally, pay a fucking shitload of money. So no, they expect, when they pay that money and they pay the players and the managers' wages, because that's as simple as that. And I know, again, it's different in rugby league, but they expect to be able to have those interviews that have been contractually existing.
I think they should play the tune dictated by the talent rather than the other way around, because that's how it is in the minute. Osaka's contractually obliged to attend these press conferences.
Yeah.
But
that's not understandable to you, that she's contractually obliged to do that.
No, but there's a certain understanding that she should be able to answer some questions. But when those answers are manipulated in the press or said a certain way that totally disrespects the player, I think she's called the bluff, and I think she's done a great job there, because for too long they've dictated what's said, the questions that are asked, and completely control the narrative of sports stories and sports athletes.
So what's the way around it? Because look, let's face it, both parties need each other, and it would be most boring game in the world, whether it's rugby league, whether it's Formula One, whether it's whatever you want to call it, a sport, a game, whatever, whether it's darts, whether it's snooker. If you did not get the stories and the humanity and the humility of the people that you're watching, and you just watched a game, whether it's 80, 90 minutes, an hour and a half of Formula One, it would be the most boring existence, when you have to have those stories. And therefore they try and rattle people, the media, and you know, they also try and get inside people, they try and understand. There's an empathy, there's a sympathy.
I think there's a lot of lack of respect sometimes from the media's point of view.
They're just poking. They're just poking, aren't they? They want a response.
Not all the time.
Yeah, no, but a lot of it is exploratory questions that lead to somewhere that then that becomes interesting. We've done it on this podcast.
Yeah.
Start asking people questions, they go somewhere, and then you follow it.
Yeah,
that's how sort of good journalism works.
But it's effective, isn't it? It's just why it's like
my issue
is
that if are we saying she is contractually obliged to contribute to the communications of a game?
She's contractually obliged if she's going to compete, and I don't want to make this all about Naomi Osaka. I wanted to make it a wider topic. However, I'll answer it. So she's contractually obliged if she is competing within the French Open, let's say, which is when she's pulled out. If she does not do bearing in mind that this was only after, you know, there's round 1, there's round 2, there's the last 16, there's the fucking quarterfinals, whatever. before every match that she plays, if she does not turn up to a pre-match press conference, she will be fined. She was fined £15,000 for not turning up to one of the press conferences. She therefore, rather than saying, I'll pay the money, whatever, she paid the money and then said, do you know what? I'm just going to pull out the whole tournament.
Good on her.
And to make a stance. This is also, let's make it clear, this is also, I think you can describe in the nicest possible way as an activist, Naomi Osaka. You know, she's worn George Floyd masks. She's worn various other victims of shootings in the US. She likes to make a statement. However, when you throw the words mental health in, you know, you have to be massively sympathetic and sensitive around those issues. And she therefore has pulled out on mental health grounds. However, what has come out of it is, and that's what I found interesting, is the structure of the press conference and the relationship of the media with players.
Well, there's too much information. The irony is we're on a podcast talking about this.
Yeah.
There's too much information out there. There's too many sources of information. There's too many different outlets for information. I'll give you an example. You know, when the rugby league blackout happened, you know, in support of you know, the diversity stuff. You know, we you know, everybody had a media blackout for the weekend.
Yeah.
St Helens website had 250% hits. So, I think this...
So people will find their way of getting their information.
Well, if you want to find it, you get it. The problem at the minute is media's being produced and shoved down our throats all the time. And I just think you know, if the people want it, they'll find it.
But that's not going to change, is it? Like, you know, I know you guys aren't big social media guys, but say, for example, the biggest stars, and even Osaka, I'm guessing, I have no idea, I've never been on her pages, but someone like Serena Williams has got, you know, multi-millions of followers.
But she's not managing her own we're
No,
talking about
John,
individual controlling the narrative around what she says. And I think Osaka feels like she doesn't control that situation. Like Mark rightly said, that is dictated by news organisations.
So there's an anxiety because she's not in control of it.
By sponsors. There's guys who are on a backdrop. You know, you don't get interviewed with the pitch in the background. There's a backdrop with names on it.
Yeah.
So there's a large corporate...
You can understand
Rolex will be on that board.
But you can, John, you can understand that because they pay your wages. They pay your wages, these guys. So
give
they
you
want their
scenario,
slice of it, don't they?
But I'm not saying it's a pressure of what we're talking about, whether it's a conflict between Osaka and the press, or it's a conflict between the larger commercial issues in a game, the press and Osaka.
But we're never going to... But no, hold on, Mark. But what? We're never going to get away from, as Wilco describes it, the larger commercial issues.
No, because they have a big impact on paying
because
people's
they fund
wages.
the whole
Of course,
thing. You know,
they
we'd be
fund a lot
nothing
of it.
without them.
But I'll give you a scenario. If every single female tennis player played in the French Open, male as well, said, look, we're not playing unless the press adhere to certain criteria where they won't spin stories and negatively talk about players that detrimentally affects either their mental well-being or their image and profile. Would they adhere to those criteria and be a bit more respectful?
But I just
of
think
course they would, but they're not because they're in control at the minute.
But then the players have to take a butty on how much they get paid.
But I'm sure they would.
You know, if they say, right, okay, well, I'll half the money I get paid. We don't want to do any press. We don't want to promote it. We're not doing anything.
Or it's just promoted, but in a more sensible manner where they're not slagging everybody off.
I don't know how much of that's controllable. So in the Osaka case, for example, and obviously this complete discussion is devoid when we're talking about mental health. We're not. You know, if these issues with mental health are as severe as Naomi's describing, then this isn't even a conversation because she just needs to take some time away and get her head together and whatever, and get some people behind her and some coaching and so on. But if this is a woman who's willing to pull out of the French Open, who's currently the world number 2, and therefore in brackets hand over a shitload of cash, which she would have got even for just appearing at the tournament and not even getting anywhere near the quarterfinals, then that becomes an issue. And I know it's different within rugby league. So here's an example.
Why is it different though?
No. Well, I say it's different because, like I said at the beginning, you guys, and I know you were different to Mark. I mean, Mark was an England Knight star back in the day, but
for one game against Ireland,
you were John. You were a star as much as you won't admit it. And when you know the early noughties, Mark, he was. People wanted to slice him and they wanted to hear what he was going to say and whatever because you were a face of the game, and that is different. I know that's your ego saying that you weren't, but you were. So people wanted to hear what you had to say, whereas for 95% of rugby league players, they're not interested in what they've got to say. People might want to know now why Zach Hardaker's headbutted Sam Tompkins, or like the story behind that, whatever. But you know, the pin-ups and the stars, people want to get into their heads, and the number ones in Osaka and the number 2 cases, exactly. Here's a story. So Jonathan Liu is a brilliant journalist. He's a very diverse divisive character, very divisive character. You know, people don't get him, don't understand it, but he's an excellent writer. And he wrote a piece on this Osaka story. And he used this abbreviation of FQMs, first question man. And I've experienced this, right, from a very young age. I'm 37 now, but when I first walked into a press conference in a work capacity when I was probably 17, 18, 19. And I walked in and there was an FQM was in existence then. It wasn't a man full of ego or, well, I say women, but there generally back then weren't any women in a press conference. That's changed a lot. This guy would ask the first question and it would have no meaning. It wouldn't be this killer kind of question that you were like, wow, he's thought like all week of how to get this guy going, get inside. It was a lazy, almost in his head thinking I'm going to break the ice with this question of just like, even if it was post-match. So here we go. St Helens just been beaten in the Good Friday derby by Wigan by 10 points. Didn't go your way today, did it, Justin? You know, it would be that lazy, but it would get things going and whatever. But it would be awkward. And I remember even at a young age sitting there thinking, this is fucking awkward and lazy. And I'd studied journalism and it felt like, not me being a snob or not me looking down on people, but I felt like I don't want to associate myself with these people. But they ran the show. And I wonder where even today, where the world has changed a lot, Naomi Osaka walks into a press conference and it's still very cock fucking heavy. Let's face it. Let's be brutally blunt and honest about it. There's a lot of, there's guys there who can't read the room and who aren't asking the right questions. And I'm not putting everyone in that category because there are some brilliant journalists, but it's being led by that. And everyone's getting off on the wrong foot, and there's no empathy, there's no humanity or humility in the questioning.
Yeah, and maybe she's just bored.
But she's young, mate.
I'd be bored. No, but bored of answering the same shit questions.
But then you have some fun with it, no? What do you do in that case?
You just get bored, don't you? That's when I got in trouble in my career.
Exactly.
From having opinions and saying things. Because
when did you get in trouble? I didn't know this.
I got told off by the club on numerous occasions for having an
For being a
opinion.
smart ass or being...
No, just having an opinion.
What was it, a young age, like, you know?
No, just having an opinion. I
Early
said
20s.
that there wasn't really a World Cup. Ireland didn't play rugby league and got
Did you in
called.
trouble for that?
No, that was a lot later.
No, it wasn't. But that opinion came out in the 2008 or whenever that World Cup was.
I know you set Tyrone McCarthy.
Yeah,
upset.
but anyway, look. When you get asked dull questions, you give dull answers, don't you? Until you get to a point where you think, well, I'll actually say something.
But John, you've hit the nail on the head because this is what I'm thinking about. Is there not a joint responsibility then for this? Because of, you've just admitted, you know, where this money comes from, you know, whether you like it or not.
It's a symbiotic like relationship between the sport and the sponsors. So the sponsors feed off the sport and the sport feed off the sponsors. But in my head, I think that the media dictate both of those world, really.
But they have a right to in some way. And
but I think it's when it's disrespectful. So if I went to a press conference and you were asking questions and you said, "Oh, you played pretty shit today, Mark."
But that's not disrespectful, is it? If it's true.
But I think that's quite disrespectful. If someone said that to me in the street, you just walk off, wouldn't you?
Well,
but there's the contractual obligation to answer that question.
Yeah, no.
And I don't think that's right for a disrespectful question have to be answered.
I understand that completely.
Which is what happens in press
No, and I
conferences.
get that. And when you guys, the sport that you're in, and it's very different to tennis. You put your body on the line, and you know you've been run over by bulldozers all 80 minutes. I get that. And you then there's the emotion. You've lost the game. There's the ego. There's all the things you want to throw in, and there's someone there who most of the time they do. Let's face it. Most of the people you've worked with over the years on Sky are very great and are very, you know, they understand empathy, they understand questioning or whatever. And this is no sort of accusation of people who work with in rugby league, but there has to be a relationship there because if there's not, this is only going to get worse. And you've seen it with Lewis Hamilton, you've seen it in Formula One, you've seen all the boycotting, whatever. And then people who have the power, who are the stars of the game, they don't give a shit about the connections with the commercial partners and whatever.
But I reckon this is what's
rights.
happened with Osaka, that she's been pushed and she's gone, do you know what, I'm sick of this shit. I'd rather make a stand now for the future that if they want me to play, I'll play, but I'm not going to sit there and get asked stupid questions that's disrespectful or it's undermining my performance and her as an athlete.
But you see that, John, now because you see both sides. And this is why it's interesting because obviously you've gone from player quite quickly into media, and you were doing media while you were player. Yeah. So you've seen both sides. So go on, what's your view when you walk in and you're doing BBC and you're doing Sky and you've done it before when you've interviewed your mates and you've interviewed Carl Amor and people like that straight after a game.
Yes, I think there's an appetite for authentic media, things that are real, that aren't built around bullshit. I think there's so much nonsense out there now that like genuine, real stuff comes through. And I think there's a responsibility. I think, firstly, one of the things I think a responsibility of a report is, or of a reporter is, to observe what has happened and articulate it succinctly to somebody who wasn't there, right? That's the job.
The facts of the game.
The fact.
Yeah.
So the opinion pieces and all that comes off the back of it are interesting, entertaining, but you know, it's a necessary evil, unfortunately, for the sport. You know, at the end of the day, if there was no TV deal in Super League wouldn't exist. So, you know, it is, as Mark said, it's a relationship that must exist. And unfortunately, people get offended, people dislike that part of the game. And somebody taking a stand, if that's what they believe, like, wholeheartedly agree with it, it's great. But ultimately, she's not going to feel the pinch because she's number 2 in the world. It might be the number 5 or 6 seed in, you know, the UK who's not then getting funding because there's no publicity, and the sponsors pull out because they're not getting the clicks that they were getting before. So it is all linked. It is all linked. It's not as simple as just saying somebody's been a bit mean or, you know, being a bit out of line to a player. At the end of the day, it's entertainment as well, so we should be scrutinised. Why would it poke me, ask me awkward questions? Don't ask. My issue is not that. I like it when somebody comes at me or has something to say.
There's ways of saying things, isn't there? And if it's it can be a leading question that's got a bit of respect about it.
But I can't think of an example in my career where I've felt offended by a question.
Really?
In my entire, I felt offended by how shit the questions were.
Well, there you
because
go.
they skated around asking the real question.
Well, go on.
But I haven't been offended by it. You're asking me to name questions.
No. But elaborate on that. You've been offended by how shit the so like the level of kind of just
talk us through that today.
Yeah, but you know what, John?
No,
sometimes the most simple question is when you're not leading and you let people speak. For example, let me give you an example, right? So when I interview Pep Guardiola, okay, the one way you can get nothing out of him and how you can upset him within 5 seconds is you put any single piece of opinion into your first question. So actually, and it's an educated view, the easiest way and the best way and what you are going to get the most from and the most, whatever you want to call it, clicks and likes and stories on the BBC Sport website and clips on Match of the Day, is when you just let him do the talking. So it's something as simple, and it sounds so shit on telly, but it's something as simple as, Pep, I've even said this to him over the years as well. I've said, Pep, I don't even want to put any words in your mouth. So you just tell me how you feel right now after that. As simple as that. And it sounds shit because it's late. You know, that may sound lazy, but you get the best stuff because he gives you what he wants.
There's also something that happens away from press conferences where they'll have a conversation, answer certain questions, but it's what they take from those answers and release into a story. I remember Raheem Sterling and Phil Foden, within the space of 2 years, both bought the mum a house, right? And one story was Flash Raheem, something along the lines of flashy Raheem Sterling.
Oh, you were there as well?
No, yeah, I was there. I bought the house. I was the estate agent. Flash Raheem Sterling buys extravagant, over-the-top house for mum. So they painted in a picture that he was flash and over-the-top. And then Phil Foden did the same. He was humble. Phil Foden buys a nice semi-detached house for his mum. And it was the same story, but spanned completely different ways. So if that journalist asked me a question, or asked Raheem Sterling a question, I'd be fully agreeable that he should be kind of backward.
You've opened up inherent societal racism issues in the UK.
Yeah, but it's not just racism, but there's certain agendas in there. It might not be race, it might be certain other things. Yeah. Might be misogynism, but it could be loads of other reasons. But Naomi Osaka might feel the same way. Yeah,
I get it. Look, so for example, here's another one. Football players, and I know it's very different within different sports, but football, and I don't know whether this happens in rugby league. I don't know whether there's the infrastructure for this to happen, but a lot of Premier League players are coached of how to deal with press conference scenarios and interviews and post-match interviews. Because, say for example, you've got these young stars they've scored the winning try in a grand final, but they're 18 and they've never been in front of the cameras. They've had one great season at St Helens or whatever, and they're suddenly
You're talking about Jack Wellsby.
Yeah, I am. Yeah, but they're talking. You know, variety of players. I mean, whether you want to call it Micah Richards back in the day at Manchester City, someone who's just not used to doing interviews and is going to swear or whatever it's going to be, and they are very vulnerable. They're very vulnerable for things to being twisted. What you said, the opinion pieces, the twisted pieces, happen well after the actual battlefield moment, don't they? They happen the next day or 2 days. They're very considered pieces. So they're trained just to bat things off. And that is the most boring thing in the world. And I've seen it because it's contagious into other sports where people will suddenly say, oh, yeah, it's all about the next game. It's like, who gives a fuck about the next game? I know you're going to say that, and I get why everyone does it, because it just bats things away. They're taught to do that, but no one's getting anything out of that. They're not learning. They're not evolving as a human being and as a young sportsman. And the media get fuck all out of it. They don't use the clips. They get angry. So then next time they come in, they'll ask something which is really intrusive.
But speaking about a bigger issue here is that the intrusive nature of media in football and journalism in football has led to the proliferation of banal platitudes around sport, making sportsmen and women
Clichés.
uninteresting, making the events uninteresting, making post-match interviews uninteresting, making press conferences dull as fucking dog shit. So let's change it.
How?
Instead of telling young people how to straight bat a question and not get caught out, how about we coach both the media and the athlete to, one, not try and catch people out, be a good journalist, and two, tell people to have a fucking opinion. Because I can't be arsed listening to
but John,
sports people.
There are the baddies, whatever you want to call them, catching people out and twisting headlines. And let's face it, a lot of the people who go into these press conferences and ask the questions...
Who reads those?
They do, because it's clickbait and it's social media these days. No, but hold on, let me finish my point. So the people that go into the press conferences aren't the subs who are in the big office in London in the shiny shard towers and whatever, coming up with the, average size penis length headlines in the newspaper on the back page.
Yeah.
So they're the ones that sell that. They're not the ones who are asking that question. And if you ask those, you get those humanity pieces, they're great. They're going to be 8 pages in. The ones that sell papers and gets clickbait and click on Twitter feeds and Instagram feeds are the punchier questions. So there is a catch-22 there.
Well, yeah, no, the media, consumes that sort of stuff, doesn't it? And there's bad journalism, bad stories occupy a lot of the space, don't they? But that doesn't mean that a sports person shouldn't give his opinion. I actually think we should encourage young sports people to say what they think, because actually what you're uncovering is opinion. And I think that's always productive. I think burying someone's opinion deep down and then for them to come out with it at like 27, 28 when they finally get a platform is dangerous. Like, encourage people to develop their opinions and say your opinions out loud, because when you say something that you believe in and it's an opinion, you get the opportunity for somebody to have a counter argument against you. Yeah. You get the opportunity to hear from somebody who doesn't like you. And if you spend all of your time straight batting questions for fear of having an opinion, what are we telling our young people?
Do you know what? It's a good opportunity for rugby league, because every other sport has this divide between players, clubs, and the media. Whereas if there was an opportunity for them to be on the same page where the media doesn't, and I think rugby league's quite good that the sport's not big enough for there's a big clickbait on the back of it. But if they were singing on the same hymn sheet, and there's a lot of exposure from players to be on media or do interviews, and if they kind of put players at ease, there'd be more availability from players to do interviews, whether that's straight after a match, giving great insight into a match or a game as it's just finished. Then it'd be quite refreshing for sports fans to see that honesty from a player's point of view that's pushed out there to Sky.
But
or
straight
whatever.
Batting gives you an easier day, and let's face it, when you've had a defeat or whatever, you straight bat something, you're an easy day.
Yeah,
you're home.
Promoting a game, there's quite a nice feeling with a player opening up. And that being publicised.
No,
to
there
the
is
world.
no, and I 100% agree with you. And what we do here, look, we're not ripping up any fucking trees here. We're asking questions. Some people accuse me of asking leading questions. Whatever. I like to think that we get some people on. We're getting people most of the time who've retired or are at the latter stages of the twilight years of their career who can be a bit more honest and whatever. But what I'd love is to be able to get people who are 22, 23 who are the stars of the game and opening up and being honest here, and then that then infiltrates into post-match interviews. It's not rocket science, is it? You know.
But there's two things that are certain about rugby league is we get headlines in the papers when something goes tits up big time. So somebody hits somebody gets caught drink driving, somebody takes drugs, somebody does something that's antisocial. That makes the news.
Rugby league is my favourite ever headline on the Sun.
It makes the headlines.
Rugby league.
What we've got to work out is, as a sport, the banal platitudes, the boring sentiments that mean nothing are never going to permeate into the mainstream media. But somebody with an opinion who actually has something to say and somebody who can articulate his opinion, that we should encourage that, and rather than this media training thing is nonsense.
Well, you told
I'll
me
give you an
how-
example. I'll give you an example, Will, of where we get it wrong in our sport is. There's a guy who I played with for a number of years. He's got the most fascinating backstory, and I won't mention him because it's not fair to do so because he's never talked about it. But you don't need to dig very far to find it. It's a big tragedy in his life, and he's never been asked about it. And when I've asked him about it, he's open about it, talks eloquently about it, but nobody's ever asked him about it. And do you know, when I spoke to somebody in the press about speaking to him, they said he's not a great talker. Well, he's sat on one of the most transformational stories that you could hear.
But are they trying to protect him?
No, they're not. They just do not. The media do not ask him because he can't present well.
Right.
So it's a mad situation, I think, that we're in, you know. And going back to the Osaka thing, like, every individual has their rights to say something or not. But the worst thing, rather than saying something or not saying something, is saying something in the middle that you don't mean and that means nothing to anybody else. That's even more damaging than not saying anything. I'd rather players go, just nothing to say about that, I'm done. Or say what they think. The bits in between, everybody, you know, it's that story you're reading in the paper, you know, you're reading the, you know, Sunday Times, and you go, oh, you know, so-and-so was disappointed with the first.
Yeah.
Do you reckon it's a responsibility of the
Next game,
clubs
cliché,
to
rubbish.
promote that, though? Because if I was playing and I had an opinion on something, and then, like you said before, the club didn't like that opinion, then that I'd get a telling off, then I wouldn't do it next
did you
time.
have
But the clubs have got a responsibility to promote characters and personalities in the game in order
to
in order
protect
to
the club.
promote. Yes, but there's a fine balancing
Yeah.
act.
No, so that's my question. So when you were at
at
St Helens, for example, right?
Yeah.
When you know, when you were Wigan, and even when you were in Australia
Australia,
with the NRL, g'day, mate.
G'day, mate.
When you were there,
Bruce.
did you ever have? Because let's face it, you're very different characters. You and John. You're an introvert. You know, you've come out your shell a little bit in the last few years, but you're
I'm an introvert.
Whereas Wilkin is the Roy Keane of rugby league, right? And always has been, even since he came over as a little boy. So, for example, were there any people educating you? Not educating is too strong a word. Was there anyone even suggesting how you deal with a post-match interview when you were at St Helens as a kid, Mark?
Deal with it.
Because it
I
is
got
something,
asked-
John. It is something. No, you're sat there with the microphone in your mouth now,
I know,
right?
but I don't think you deal.
No,
what
but
do you
there
mean
is,
deal
because
with
it can go so terribly wrong.
Saints offered most of the younger to middle-aged lads an opportunity to do media training, and they offered about 5 or 6 of us when I first signed, and I signed up to it. Anyway, nobody else did, and then I went to Media City. It was Dave Woods and somebody else, and nobody from Saints went, and there was like 5 or 6 witness players there, and I was on my own. But I knew that wasn't media training to tell me what to say. It was cues and tips on how to present yourself, which was quite good. But I think that the expectation to say a certain thing is there from rugby clubs. They do. I think they do expect you to say straight back questions, don't they?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think you encourage not to have an opinion in sport, especially when you're in.
Was that the same with you though? Because
Yeah.
you're 10 years before that. So
Yeah,
that?
yeah.
Was it the same?
Yeah. If it's anything detrimental to the team, don't have an opinion.
But it's low risk.
Bury it.
Low risk.
Bury it. Just bury it. Bury your opinions. Don't take your opinions to work. You know.
But that's my point, John. You're being encouraged to bury your opinions. So
Yeah.
what chance have we got trying to get opinions out of you in a scenario post-match?
well-
they can only ask. They can only try so much.
Well,
journalists.
what you've got to do is keep digging away, and eventually you'll catch.
Sometimes you get 90 seconds,
I
John.
know, but
and
you're
that's
trying
why
to-
you get
you're
these
trying to catch 'em
banal.
Marlin.
No, but that's why you get these banal answers.
Yeah, no.
and this cliche.
from a club's point of view.
continuity.
But it's boring for us listening to those questions, so we just give the same stuff.
So
and
it's a stalemate, is what you're saying.
There's a stalemate. That's exactly what's happening
Yeah.
in media.
Yeah.
That's why they should be on the singing from the same hymn sheet. There's Conrad Hurrell has more Instagram followers than anybody else in Super League, and because he's a character, and I reckon he puts bums on seats with the way he plays and the way he kind of reacts to the crowd, and he has a personality. As if you rate him as a player or not, he gets people coming to games and getting excited about rugby league. Now, I think Leeds are quite good that when they signed him, they knew what they were getting in for because he's got a larger than life personality. That should be pushed more from all clubs because
Yeah, but is it not dangerous then just relying on like Mr. X, who John has just described, and other people like we've said in the past, George Burgess, whose dad died of motor neurons, and he's been through all these things. And everyone's got backstories. We've all got backstories.
Well, just let them tell the story.
No, I know, but is it not dangerous then to rely on that? That seems to me to be
you might not have a
backstory.
backstory. You might just be like funny and charismatic, and there's nothing wrong with that either.
John, you know what good journalists are like. You work with Mark Chapman, right? Chappers is one of the best.
He's
Right?
his
He asks
best
great
friend.
questions.
His new best friend.
He's a great thinker. He genuinely, to me, despite him taking all the work that I may have had 10 years on, I accept that one because he's outstanding. He's an outstanding journalist. But you're never going to get that level of journalists through all the sports and through all the stations and through all the local and commercial radio stations and whatever, and people going and asking these questions. And this is absolutely not an attack on people, because I think Jenna Brooks and all these people, I genuinely think Sky do a fantastic job. That's my opinion. I think they do, with what they're working with and the money that they're working with it, and the budgets, for example, that they get. But do you know what I'm saying? You're not going to get that level of...
Oh, the best journalism that I've seen is that empathy, they win your trust.
You can't coach that into a journalist, can you?
You should. I think you should be able to build trust with people. It's like I don't think naturally, a lot of the rugby league journalists are that sort of that type of person, that would automatically go and build trust. There's a lot of, obviously, like staff journalists for rugby league got dropped off the papers, didn't they? So, national papers used to have staff journalists, and at that time, I'd say the staff journalists had a bit more leeway to go out and get stories and find stuff. But the demand is we need to report on just the bare bones of what's happening in the game, and that's where we're at.
I think.
Has there ever been a big editorial on a player in a national paper?
Well, there has on people like Sam Burgess, and they've just try and destroy them, don't they?
But the word John says, their trust is big. And that's from a player to a journalist point.
But then if you trust someone too much, you get your pants pulled down.
Yeah, I know that. But you got a track record and reputation to uphold as a journalist. So I think that trust is massive. And when I've spoken to guys who've come on our podcast, whether it's Callum Watkins or Dan Sargentson last year or Keegan Hurst when he told his story, when it's sensitive subjects, there needs to be an element of trust for people to open up. And I think
people then not expose those weaknesses, Mark. And I'm not saying anyone would do that with Callum with the suicide story which he told us. But I'm saying when there's an emotional story, which then people would be like, do you know what am I going to get out of telling someone that story? I may get a couple of weeks of like, oh, I'm so I'll sympathise with you, blah blah blah. But then would that not be used as a tool to then expose someone down the line?
Well, we've only experienced it ourselves, but we've been trusted to have a conversation about sensitive subjects like that, but we've not unearthed that kind of or used that story for a different agenda, have we?
Yeah, no, but we're sat on a podcast that, if it does well, gets clicks.
Yeah, but we're not. Let's face it, we're not here. We're not here. We're not here to. As I said before, with various BBC News, we're not here to make people cry and do well. I'm great. No. I'm all up for having a conversation, and learn about someone's past.
Yeah, I know,
but we're different to the people we're talking about.
Yeah, but what we're just talking about there is we're sensitively covering a topic because we're not concerned about the clicks and like how many people watch it and all that, which is actually bullshit, isn't it? Because we're sat here on a podcast where we get paid to be here that's sponsored by Super League. Therefore, there is an inherent interest in that.
Yeah, but our agenda isn't to stitch someone up.
No, but it's the content that we're creating that generates...
it's the agenda, because you wouldn't give a shit. If someone said to you, John, by the way, you're not asking the right questions, sweetheart, you're off this next week, you wouldn't give a shit. So it's nothing to do with that,
No, but I'm saying the content drives the interest, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So... We're all looking for that content.
Yeah, but equally, even if I was sat here with someone's mate, I wouldn't want to have a chat sat on a couch with a beer, asking like, "Has everything been all right?" You're having a mundane an hour conversation. We're getting to.
I think it's agenda and purpose at the end of the day. If our agenda is to embarrass somebody to get clicks, that wouldn't be right. And,
but I don't know.
People see that.
Give me an example of journalism that is embarrassing.
Well, I'll give you an example.
100%.
No, I'll give you
the Raheem Sterling thing.
Oh yeah, football.
That's football.
Yeah, but we're talking about football.
No, I'll give you an example. Yeah, no, and I'm comparing a lot of this
happen.
to football just because that's my experiences, whatever. But for example, everyone remembers that moment when Mourinho walked out of a press conference and went 3 times, respect. That was to a journalist, right, called Jamie Jackson, right? He works for The Guardian. JJ. He, like a lot of mainstream journalists on the front line, whatever, you almost can't build a relationship with the protagonists because you can't get too close to what you're going to shit on at times and whatever, and write certain things because they're never going to agree with everything you write, and they can't. That relationship would not work at that level of sport. So Jamie Jackson, for example, will sit there and almost on purpose put on this faceless human of almost like trying to disguise himself with sunglasses on and whatever at the time, just ask these questions that aren't humane and that aren't humane is the wrong description, but
respectful.
that aren't they don't have empathy within the question and so on, because you can't. You have to maintain a relationship, but you can't get too close to them because you'll lose your job. He'll be out the door if he's not getting the stories and the clicks and whatever. And more so now than ever, it has become a story of clicks. And we go back in full circle to the point where all these main stars have social media. They can connect with their own personal fans and people who are interested in them in 150.
Well, they should do that then. They should just all the athletes of the French Open should fuck all the press conferences off.
No.
Say, do you want to play? Do you want us to play or not? Yes, and then they just do their own press conferences through social media, and then see how far the media get on the back of that.
But then that wouldn't work in the stalemate that John's described, because the rights holders would just go, "Oh yeah, no, we do want you to play. And if you're not, we're not going to fucking pay you."
Do you know what happened then? They'd stop asking ridiculous, stupid questions.
My point. Everyone has a direct route to people, right? So they can put their own content, and they can monopolize their own. What's the word I'm looking for? Their own, however they want to shove this down people's throats, right? Whereas the mainstream media isn't interested in that because it's monopolized content. It's like that they want the tricky questions. They want to poke the bear in the cage after a game because they get back page headlines.
Yeah.
So how does the stalemate end, John?
Well, don't know. I think people have a genuine opinion, have something to say. Just have something to say, and actually do what all great politicians do, is dictate the flow of a conversation.
That's the point.
By you don't answer the question, you answer you acknowledge the question, and then you take a conversation where you want it to go.
So as an example, I'd say, John, you played pretty shit today.
I'd say, well, it's interesting you say that, Mark. Yeah. Actually, if we look at Wigan's form over the last 4 weeks, they've been incredible, haven't they? They've won the last 4 games, and how well is Jackson Hastings playing at the minute? He's been fantastic.
Do you know what I'd say? I go, you think I was shit? Johnny Lomax was really bad.
Do you know what I think in that last 40 seconds, John's hit the nail on the head, because for me, if I was going in as an independent person into a club, into Wigan, St Helens, to these big clubs, and trying to coach young players, so I was going to Wells, be like, sit down with me for just 2 minutes and I'll tell you something.
Here, watch Matt Hancock and Boris Johnson deflect every question.
I'd be more topical and more relevant.
Seeing they've got death on their hands.
I'd be warmer than those guys. I would say exactly that. Someone asks you a question, right? Are you going to be the boxer or are you going to be the punch bag? Because if you're the punch bag, you're going to get fucked up, mate. And that's going to be contagious and it's going to carry on for the rest of your career. Whereas if you're the boxer, but a very polite boxer, I'll take you 12 rounds and I'll just beat you on
How
points.
polite of a boxer? Anster Crawler?
You're that person.
Roy
And then you
Jones?
say to them, yeah, do you know what? Great question, but politician Tony Blair, throw your hand down 3 times and make those points even after a game, because it just becomes robotic to be able to do it with a big smile on your face, with lots of personality, and you take the answer exactly where you wanted it to go. They repeat the question, you do it again. With a smile on your face, thank you, good night.
Yeah, control the narrative. Players.
We've just convinced. We've just won it. We've won the argument.
But people do that. They do that, and they are the characters of the game. Klopp is a great example of that.
He still gets his feathers ruffled,
tied up in it, and he's emotional and he's human. But that's why people love him, because he trips himself up and he gets angry and he's a hypocrite, and he's human. We're all fucking hypocrites. You're not going to be like people like the human aspect of. They like mistakes. They like people fucking up. They like whatever, but. If you can consistently have a bit of humanity and you can control the thing, then you're in the box seat. And I think, someone like Naomi Osaka is too young to understand that at the moment.
Or maybe she is controlling the narrative.
Maybe she's ahead of all of us.
Maybe she had an injury and thought, couldn't be arsed, and thought, I'm just going to use this for my own personal gains going forward.
But I think I genuinely think it's interesting. I think
it's great that she's done it.
in any sport, I think there isn't whether there's the budget, and I think that's important. Whether there is the time, whether there's the infrastructure for this to even be a conversation, I'm not even sure within rugby league. And that's not me belittling it, but someone going into forget championship. Let's just talk about Super League level. At Lee, John, be careful what you say about Lee Centurions, but are you telling me that they've got someone in there that can just go in and go like, do you know what? Let's just have some role play. Let's have some foreplay today. We're going to spend the day with the whole squad. I'm going to pretend to be that wanker journalist from The Sun, and I'm going to ask you those questions. Is that even done? Because that would cost you about $1,000 for the day. And I think a lot could be learned from that, John. A lot could be learned from that conversation.
It could. But the products of those conversations, I did a bit of that when I was young, and it's like how not to get in trouble in interviews. Whereas I kind of think differently. I think getting yourself in trouble, not because you're doing it intentionally. I just think if you deeply hold beliefs and you have opinions, keeping them inside, like, it just sends them underground. If you're encouraging people to just keep their opinions underground, I just think it's never good.
But John, you're speaking from you're I love you, but you're one of the weirdest guys I've ever met.
Yeah, that's great.
No, that is great. Exactly. So you're talking from your point. I just don't think you're talking from someone who it doesn't think like that. And great. The journalist, I'd love to interview 100 of you every night.
Do you think like that? As quite a forward-thinking guy, you wouldn't have thought like that at 22, 23, would you?
Yeah, I've never had a problem saying what I think.
Even at that age?
Yeah, no.
When you did a press conference for saying, do you not think I probably shouldn't say this? Or?
Well, no, I said winning the 2004 Challenge Cup final was a bit underwhelming, which didn't go down well at the time. Because after the event, it was like amazing, but I was like, right, now what? We're back.
Well, Mark, you're a prime example. People think you're fucking boring, and you are. Like you don't say anything. It's only in retirement that you sort of come out your shell and you thought, like, do you know what? I'm going to be a bit more.
He's digging you out.
I'm going to be a bit more outspoken. But you,
I don't think I'm boring.
You played it safe. You straight batted everything. You were never out. You never got LBW. You were straight.
Because nobody asked me questions. Because I was never considered a player that of interest.
So it goes back to my original point that if you ask, you ask a shit question, you get a shit answer, correct? But also, if you straight bat something after,
but they ask the stars of the game questions. They ask the superstars who I play with. They're not going to ask me who just fucking made 40 tackles a game and just did his best, are they really?
But
I was never.
But you get spun around. It's like
right,
in football, for example, right? I'll tell you this: at Manchester City, they have a formula of interviews. So say, for example, so-and-so scores a hat-trick, right? Say Kevin De Bruyne scores a hat-trick. Oh, Sky, BT, BBC, Match of the Day, everyone who's the rights holders, 5 Live, TalkSport, whether it's radio, whether it's whatever, whether it's television, they want to speak to the star of the day. Some big clubs now say, oh, he did last week. So you're going to get
Mark Flanagan, who's boring as fuck.
Exactly. So it's rotated, and again, I know that's different within different sports, but that's the level that it's got to at elite sports and elite interest sports that is going to be your first clickbait on Twitter, on Instagram, on the BBC Sport website, where they're even rotating it. So it's like they've already got a plan to be like to take away the romance of a game. Jon Wilkin, you just scored. Fucking hell, you never scored a hat trick, did you?
No, he scored 4, maybe.
Did he? Oh,
yeah.
Take it back. Okay. We want to speak to Jon Wilkin. Oh, you can't. He did last week.
That'd
it's
never
got to
happen with
work
John.
both ways, hasn't it? It's got to work both ways.
He'd be begging for an interview.
Yeah, interview me.
Talk to me.
What would understanding here is there is an intrinsic link between the media and sports. The relationship, like any relationship, is evolving with the advent of social media, with people being able to control their own narrative, rightly what you say, Will. And those archaic structures like the press conference are nearly dead, aren't they? That's not going to exist for a lot longer. It's like a relic of Fleet Streety sort of.
Do you know what it is? You're going back to like the 18th century, the sort of like the comparison of what it is. You're there, and people are like unrolling their scrolls, and they're taking, they're like the format is so out of date, and it becomes even more out of date when you have FQM. But
I think what John was touching on then, I think the time of the media making enemies of athletes or celebrities or people in the media and being able to spin stories whatever way they want and having no consequences is gone. Because of social media, they can either straight back questions and say yes, no, whatever, and they can be in control of their own narrative and their own stories and their own message to the fans. I think there's going to be a time to come where the media has to play ball a little bit more and be a bit more sensitive.
But enemies work. Zach Hardacre, you could argue, is a bit of a pantomime villain with the enemies work because they sell stories.
A little bit, but I think the advantage that the media have over athletes and people in the spotlight those days are a bit more numbered.
And I felt I should have pulled Chris Radlinski up on something last week, because he said that, you know, if you look through the social media profiles of your players and it's not good enough, it's not marketable enough for the sport, the club signed Zach Hardaker.
And why did they sign him? Exactly.
Should
We get him on
No,
Zoom?
because he's a good player.
Mark, dial him up.
No, but he's a good player, but he'd had loads of misdemeanours and whatnot, and it wasn't a great brand representation. And it only dawned on me after we'd finished. I was like, but that, you know. So we've got to be careful who we put forward, and we've got to be careful, you know, who we promote, because there's some really interesting players who don't get a microphone put in front of them. Why? Because they're not done anything controversial. They don't say an awful lot, because they've been forced into this system of just saying nothing and keeping out of the way. But let me tell you, there's some mega interesting stories from people who you just wouldn't speak to, and they don't get interviewed.
No,
and Mark's example's right. An articulate guy, well educated, probably didn't get interviewed as much as he should to get his opinions out there. So
He's on Sky every week now. He's on Sky last.
Yeah, exactly.
But that, you know, it's a great point. But I also wonder, with people like Robert Elston and, you know, the future of Super League going forward, how much this is even on the agenda of board meetings. Because I imagine, no, I'm answering my own question, but I imagine it's fucking right down the bottom, and I understand why it is. I understand why this wouldn't even really be anywhere near, because you're negotiating TV deals. You're worrying about the immediate future of the game. Don't get me wrong, all of this collectively could enhance the immediate future of the game, but you're batting off problems about Israel Folau saying things about gay people. There are bigger issues at stake, and it doesn't. And let's be honest, rugby league does not have the infrastructure to be going through all of the elite clubs and having these conversations.
Yeah, no, we need publicity like any sport. But like I said, the more information, there's more information out in the world now than there ever has been, and it's like exponentially growing. So when you're competing with all of that information and technology, and it's just increasing, audio books, you know, computer games, like it's just, there's infinite sources of entertainment online now, and you can get your information from anywhere. It's like, how do you permeate, like push through into mainstream media now?
It's harder than ever.
Yeah,
but you guys have a responsibility to do this. You know, I know you're doing this podcast for different reasons. Mark, you need to do it to keep things going, and you got two kids and whatever. Yeah. Wilkin could walk out.
Business is going fine,
Wilkin's
mate,
the Roy Keane of rugby league.
What are you doing up here from coming up from London once a week for a little podcast?
And in all seriousness, I think you two, as former players, I'm not saying you have a responsibility, because that's too much of a burden. But everything we've talked about, you could get one of those players sat on that empty couch next to you, Mark, and have these conversations, and people then become far more like, wow, I didn't see this side
I
of
love
this
the
person.
game. I absolutely love it. It's
Callum
given me
Watkins,
so much in the world.
One sec. Callum Watkins, for example, what we did a couple of weeks ago, he's 30 years old now. The story that he told on this podcast, right? And this is not me bigging up this podcast, because there are fucking millions of podcasts and everyone does a good job on them, whatever. Ours is just another one in the ocean. People may never have known that story, right? For a player that has been absolutely fantastic at Leeds, and that's, you know, it's gone to the NRL and whatever, and is still only 30 years old. So that he could have quite happily got to 50 and never told that story, and people would have never have known that. So I think you guys do have a bit of a responsibility in that sense to be able to engage with them, because you're still at a level where you're the same sort of age and you can have these conversations with these guys.
Yeah, because like I was going to say then, I love the sport. It's given me everything in life, and if I could help promote it in any way, I would do. And I think there's a lot of players that are so talented and have great stories to tell. I think it should be pushed out there and told, because it isn't all the time. And that's one thing that I think this thing might have done a little bit, is kind of tell that story.
Some shit stories.
Stories, yeah.
Of course there is. Of course
some
there is.
people who you don't.
They're always going to be great, are they?
No.
Like Sean Long pissing on your passport. You know, is that a great story? I loved it, but you know, some people might at home be like,
I'm not sorry about the stories.
Janet might have been like, that's a bit inappropriate.
Yeah. No, we need to think seriously about the game, you know, about where we go.
Otherwise, it won't be taken seriously, John. That's my point. And I'm speaking from someone like, I'm not in the game.
Yeah,
I'm just an outsider asking little questions. You know, that I genuinely think, and it's not just about rugby league, it's other sports as well. If you want to be taken seriously, you have to have all of the things we just talked about for the last 45 minutes. But there is a stalemate, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, and
But
play
like
your own rules as well.
Billy-
Let players be their own person.
But
Like,
rugby-
that's different.
Rugby league's like a supermarket now. You walk in, or sports are like.
What kind of supermarket? Are we sort of Morrison's? Or
No,
we,
no.
you know,
What I'm
like,
talking
Waitrose,
about
if
is,
you-
let's say you walk down the biscuit aisle in a supermarket.
Yeah.
And then all of the sports are the biscuits, and then the people pretty much know which biscuit they're going for. They go, right there, bang, got that.
hobnob straight away.
Yeah, or whatever. Well, you're relying on a very niche audience to come and get what we've got. That's the problem.
Yeah,
Isn't it?
Rich
yeah,
tea.
but and I know exactly what you're saying. But then make your biscuits the sexiest fucking biscuits
Yeah,
ever,
so you
and
need to
someone
do
might like a
some
little
stuff that are
nibble. You know,
different.
that's the point, isn't it?
Yeah.
You may not. Your biscuits will not appeal to people sat in Fulham and Chelsea and West London and Ealing or whatever, and that's fine. And accept that. You know,
But then
the Trailblazers made something different.
Don't take the 5 best biscuits out your pack and let them go and play in the NRL in Australia.
Yeah, I don't think you'll ever go. That's a whole. That's a.
But
You're
if you're a
taking
pack
us
of
there
biscuits,
again.
stand out from the crowd and do something different, which might be like unleashing the personalities in your game without stigmatising them in the press.
I think Naomi Osaka, whether intentional or not, and I think it absolutely was. I think she's a very intelligent young woman, has opened up let's call it a biscuit packet, which is
packet of worms.
which is fascinating. I think it's opened a fascinating discussion into something we all knew that was there. It's only just
it's been coming, hasn't it?
yeah, but it's only just sort of just shoved it down our throats again and been like, oh, remember this? Yeah, we better do something about it. You know, it's a stalemate. It's fascinating. It'll be amazing to see how people like her, people at the absolute top of sports that people pay a lot of money for. You know, your top footballers, your top tennis stars, your top F1 drivers like Hamilton can make a difference, because we wouldn't have, let's face it, we wouldn't have been talking about this week had it not been for her profile.
Yeah, no,
If Kyle Amor had said, "That's it, I'm not doing a press conference today," we wouldn't bat an eyelid.
I like Carl.
No,
I like Kyle, but I'm
In
just
fact, I
saying,
love Carl.
I don't love him. I like him.
Roy Keane, any final words?
Do me a favour.
It's good, that, wasn't it? You know, I'm starting to think it's good, this.
just good.
Anyway.
Throwing it round.
Throwing it a long
Yeah.
way to go, but there we go. Don't forget, you can subscribe, by the way. I don't think many people have.
No.
You can,
rate and
give us a
review.
review, because we keep dropping every week. I don't know where
My mum got a mention on the reviews.
did she?
Yeah, apparently they want to see
I'll give
Sue
her- I'll give
Flanagan on the
Sue a
show.
review. So will John.
I'm more of a Kyle
Where are
Wilkin
these
fan.
reviews? Where are they?
All over. Right, give us a little follow at Art with your RL on Twitter, and we will be seeing you when Mark?
In a while. Crocodile.